the snow and the light. From the other side we're broadcasting the truth between the old guard and the tech-driven youth. Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Kiev is cold and the borders are tight. The dragon looks west while the eagle takes flight. NATO is moving like gears in a clock. Sanctions are falling like rain on the rock. Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Silicon brains making plans for the front. The diplomats argue, the soldiers are blunt. A whirl in a loop, a whirl in a spin. Where does the news end and the future begin? Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Red lines on a digital map, wait for the signal to snap. Side. The feed is going dark. Live from the other side. The feed is going dark. Live from the other side.
Evening everyone, welcome back to the show. It's been another perfectly normal week in the 21st century. Latvia has started installing concrete anti-tank barriers known as Dragon's Teeth along its border with Russia, with anti-tank ditches planned next. Because when countries start building fortifications across Europe, history has always shown that everything is going brilliantly. Meanwhile in Japan, newly released census figures show the country's population has fallen more than 3 million people. One of the world's largest economies continues to face the demographic crisis driven by low birth rates and ageing population. Apparently, the economic growth becomes slightly more difficult when the population needed to generate that growth keeps disappearing. In the world of artificial intelligence, Anthropic has announced a new funding round valuing the company at an estimated $965 billion, putting the creator of Claude ahead of OpenAI in overall valuation. So while most people are still asking AI to write emails and shopping lists, investors are assigning trillion-dollar valuations to companies building machine intelligence. Belarusian authorities also had to deny reports that a Belavia passenger plane had been shot down near Moscow after dramatic images spread across social media. The aircraft landed safely, the passengers arrived safely, and the images turned out to be AI generated. We now live in a world where before asking whether something happened, we first must ask whether reality itself is genuine. Elsewhere, reports indicate that a Blue Origin New Glenn rocket vehicle was destroyed during operations at Cape Canaveral. The race to commercialise space continues, although gravity remains stubbornly undefeated. Here in Belarus, the new bas-relief sculptures have been installed on the facade of Minsk National Historical Museum. Inside, work continues on 11 exhibition halls covering Belarusian history from the era of ancient principalities to the modern state, alongside exhibitions dedicated to science, space exploration and national achievements. A reminder that while much of the world seems busy arguing about history, some countries are still building museums to preserve it. President Lukashenko has also arrived in Astana, Kazakhstan, attending the Eurasian Economic Forum, where discussions focused on economic integration, trade and long-term development across the Eurasian Economic Union. And those stories actually lead quite nicely into tonight's main topics, because beneath all these headlines lies the same question: who is shaping the future and what kind of systems are being built around us? Tonight we'll examine the escalating quantum arms race between the United States and China, the battle for artificial intelligence supremacy, the growing surveillance architecture behind the modern internet, the Palantir and NSA connection revealed by Snowden, and the broader convergence of technology, power, economics and geopolitics that is reshaping the global order. And finally tonight we'll cover the tragic attack in Starobilsk, where drone strikes reportedly hit a dormitory and educational buildings, killing and injuring students and young civilians. Whatever political position people are taking on the wider conflict, the deaths of children should never be normal news. Before we begin, tonight's show is proudly sponsored by the Systems at Scale book series, available now on Amazon and paperback in Kindle versions. And just a quick mention, our special guest cancelled at the last moment, had an emergency, and so the format will stay the same, and the questions I was going to ask him I will ask you, and if you want to answer them in the comments or just think about what I asked, and I'll answer them as well. So here we go. Right then, let's begin. The next world war probably won't start with tanks crossing borders. It'll start with some guy in a clean room wearing a white suit staring at a glowing chip while governments throw trillions at machines nobody fully understands. That's where we are now. The United States and China are no longer competing just over trade and manufacturing. They're competing over who controls the future operating system of civilization itself. Quantum computing is the new Manhattan Project, except this time the weapon isn't a bomb. It's potentially control over communications, finance, AI, logistics, military planning, encryption and surveillance all at once. And the scary part, most people still think quantum computing is some weird science fiction experiment sitting in a university basement next to a dusty blackboard. It isn't. Governments are already treating this as a national security emergency. DARPA, the same people who helped create the internet, are openly racing towards utility-scale quantum systems. China, meanwhile, is pouring money into quantum infrastructure like it's building railways in the 19th century. And unlike Western democracies that spend half their time arguing about pronouns and banning plastic straws, China can actually plan 20 years ahead. That's the uncomfortable reality. The real danger here isn't the faster computers, it's what quantum systems can power itself. Modern civilizations run on encryption. Your bank account, military networks, satellites, state secrets, energy systems. Everything depends on codes that current computers struggle to crack. Quantum systems may eventually smash through those protections like wet paper. Imagine one country suddenly having the ability to read everyone else's communications while protecting its own behind quantum secure networks. That isn't an advantage. That's digital God mode. And now quantum systems are merging with AI, because apparently giving artificial intelligence near unlimited processing power wasn't dystopian enough already. China is now developing photonic quantum chips using light instead of electricity, which sounds fantastic until you realize this could massively accelerate AI systems, autonomous warfare, predictive surveillance, and battlefield coordination. This is the new arms race, not missiles, not aircraft, not carriers, information dominance. And unlike the Cold War, this competition touches every part of daily life simultaneously. Whoever dominates quantum computing may dominate AI. Whoever dominates AI may dominate finance, surveillance, logistics, and military systems. The whole thing cascades. The West still thinks history is basically over and everyone just wants Netflix subscriptions and electric cars. China thinks history never stopped. That's why they're dangerous. So the question's for you, the viewers. Do you think China is now planning further ahead than Western governments? My take, absolutely. China plans in decades while Western governments plan or struggle to plan beyond the next election cycle and Pride Month logo updates. One side builds infrastructure, the other side debates hashtags. Would you trust AI systems running military operations? Because giving emotionally detached machines nuclear-adjacent decision-making powers has historically worked out brilliantly in science fiction. Nothing says stability like algorithmic warfare. Third question for you: is quantum computing the next nuclear bomb moment? My take: potentially worse. Nuclear weapons threaten physical destruction. Quantum dominance could threaten financial systems, communications, intelligence, AI, and entire state infrastructures simultaneously. Last question: has the West underestimated how serious the race has become? My take: the West has spent 20 years outsourcing industry and importing culture wars, while China quietly built supply chains, chip factories, and strategic planning ministries. So yes. Now, speaking of AI, information control and governments becoming increasingly normal about monitoring literally everything you do. Let's talk about Palantir, the company that always sounds like it was named by a Bond villain after a 3-day cocaine binge. Palantir spends years presenting itself as a heroic tech company helping fight terrorism and fraud. Very noble, very cinematic. But thanks to Edward Snowden, we eventually discovered what was really happening behind the curtain. Turns out the intelligence agencies weren't just spying on targets anymore. They were building searchable archives of human civilization itself. That's what X-Key Score was. According to NSA documents, analysts could basically search internet activity the way you search Google. Emails, browsing histories, chats, metadata, social media activity, all vacuumed into giant databases, and Palantir's systems help organize it. This is the part where people usually say, well, I've got nothing to hide. Yes, and cows probably think the farmer is their friend right up until the gate closes. The problem isn't whether you personally are interesting. The problem is infrastructure. Once the governments build systems capable of monitoring populations at planetary scale, those systems never disappear. They simply find new justifications. First is terrorism, then extremism, then misinformation, then social cohesion, then harmful narratives, then dangerous speech, then eventually, why are you asking questions? And now we've reached the point where governments and giant tech corporations are basically fused together like some kind of digital state megastructure. That's the real story Snowden exposed, not just spying, industrialized surveillance. The internet was sold to the public as liberation. What is actually became was the greatest monitoring system in human history. And the craziest part, most people voluntarily carry tracking devices in their pockets attached to their houses, wear them on their wrists, and argue online about privacy is outdated. We build a civilization where people install microphones in their homes and call it convenience, while Palantir evolved from intelligence contractor into something far bigger: military targeting systems, predictive policing, battlefield AI, immigration tracking, and massive government databases. This is where the quantum story connects directly to the surveillance story, because once AI, quantum systems, predictive analysis, facial recognition, and mass data collection fully merge together, you no longer have traditional governments, you have algorithmic governance. A world where systems know what you do before you do it, and governments absolutely love that idea, because managing populations is much easier when everyone becomes a data point instead of a citizen. Here's some questions for you again. Do you think mass surveillance can ever be rolled back? My take: governments surrender surveillance powers the same way crocodiles surrender lunch. Once the infrastructure exists, they just rename the justification and keep expanding it. Question 2. Have people traded privacy for convenience without realizing it? My take, people voluntarily installed microphones, cameras, tracking devices and biometric scanners in their homes, then panic about misinformation online. So I'd say yes. Third question for you. Is Palantir just the beginning of something much larger? My take, Palantir is basically the demo version. The real system is merging of governments, AI, finance, surveillance and predictive analytics to one giant managerial organism. Last question for you. At what point does technology become the form of control rather than freedom? I think usually around the moment your digital ID, banking access, speech permissions, movement and employment all depend on centralized systems behaving themselves. Now, once you combine collapsing empires, mass surveillance, AI systems, financial instability, and permanent war propaganda, you start entering something much darker. And this is where modern politics starts becoming generally weird, not because the world no longer behaves rationally. Look at the Middle East right now. Most people think it's just another geopolitical conflict, oil, pipelines, military alliances, terrorism, whatever. But underneath all that sits something far deeper, the psychology of declining empires. Historically, empires don't decline gracefully. They become paranoid, financialized, internally divided, obsessed with enemies, obsessed with narratives, obsessed with maintaining legitimacy while everything underneath quietly rots. Does that sound familiar? The United States now sits on enormous debt, social fragmentation, demographic instability, collapsing trust in institutions, and permanent political hysteria. Europe looks increasingly exhausted and directionless. Meanwhile, global power is shifting eastward. That creates panic, and panic creates escalation. Now add religion and apocalyptic thinking into the mix. Because believe it or not, there are people in positions of power who generally interpret the world through the biblical prophecy, messianic expectations and end times frameworks. And before people laugh that off, remember, human history has always been driven by stories, nations, money, ideology, religion, democracy, revolutions. All of it depends on collective belief. Modern politics isn't rational, it's mythological with spreadsheets. That's why everything feels theatrical now. Emotional, hysterical, symbolic. Governments aren't just managing economies anymore. They're managing perception itself. And technology is becoming the new religion. AI increasingly behaves like secular god system, always watching, always learning, always present, always collecting information. The old religious promise was omniscience. Silicon Valley basically said, yeah, we could build that. A wonderful idea. What could possibly go wrong? The deeper issue here is that all these crises are merging together simultaneously. Financial instability, AI expansion, mass surveillance, geopolitical fragmentation, demographic collapse, ideological extremism, permanent information warfare. That's why the world feels unstable in a way that's hard to explain, because multiple systems are weakening at the same time. And historically, periods like this rarely produce moderation. They produce acceleration. That's the dangerous part. Here's the questions for you. Are we watching the early stages of imperial decline in the West? My take. Debt is exploding, infrastructure decaying, political hysteria everywhere, collapsing trust, endless wars, and elites lecturing the public constantly. Historically, that's not a good sign. Next question. Has technology become the new form of a religion? My take is absolutely. Silicon Valley basically replaced priests with programmers and promised digital salvation through apps, algorithms, and cloud-based omniscience. Another question for you. Do modern governments rely more on narrative control than truth? My take is modern politics is mostly PR management with occasional policy accidents. Controlling perception matters more than solving problems right now. And the last question for this is, Why does global politics increasingly feel irrational and theatrical? And my take is because collapsing systems are becoming emotional and symbolic. Reality gets replaced with spectacle while governments try desperately to maintain legitimacy through performance. Now I want to finish tonight on with something far more serious, because whatever people think about this war in Ukraine politically, what happens in Starobilsk is horrific. On the night of the May 22nd, coordinated drone strikes, Ukrainian drone strikes, hit the city, including a dormitory and college where students and young teachers were sleeping. According to local authorities and witnesses, the attack unfolded in waves. Initial drones struck infrastructure across the city before later attacks hit the educational buildings directly during the early hours of the morning. Witnesses described ceilings collapsing, fires spreading through the upper floors, and students trying to escape through shattered windows while flames consumed sections of the structure. Children died in that building. Others were seriously injured beneath collapsing concrete and fragmentation blasts. The reports emerged afterwards alleged that multiple drone systems were used, including larger jet-powered UAVs and drones equipped with fragmentation-style warheads designed to maximize injuries through shrapnel dispersal. The political arguments surrounding the attack are already predictable. Competing narratives, accusations, denials, counterclaims, propaganda from all sides. But underneath of all that, one reality remains unavoidable. Young people were trapped in a burning dormitory in the middle of the night. This war increasingly demonstrates how modern drone warfare is changing the nature of conflict itself. Operators can now strike cities remotely from enormous distances away. Swarms of drones can overwhelm defences over hours. Reconnaissance systems can monitor emergency responses in real time. The battlefield is no longer separate from civilian life. Dormitories, schools, apartments, energy systems, transport hubs, everything becomes part of the war space. And that's what makes these conflicts like this so psychologically destructive. Civilians no longer feel removed from the front line because the front line increasingly comes to them. For the families involved, none of the geopolitical analysis matters tonight. None of the narratives matters. None of the strategic arguments matter. What matters is that children who were planning futures, exams, university placements and ordinary lives are now gone. And regardless of politics, the world should never become numb to that. Questions for our viewers tonight. Has drone warfare permanently changed the nature of civilian safety? My take is yes. Modern drones allow strikes to reach deep into civilian areas with speed, precision and very little warning. The distinction between frontline and civilian space is increasingly disappearing. Next question for you. Why do modern wars increasingly target infrastructure tied to ordinary life? Well, because modern warfare is psychologically has become as military. Well, because modern warfare is psychological as much as military. Damaging schools, energy systems, housing and transport spreads fear far beyond the immediate target itself. Next question, can international law even keep up with modern drone conflict? Well, I think at present international frameworks are struggling to adapt. Drone warfare obviously evolves far faster than the legal systems designed around older forms of conventional conflict. Last question on this topic. Are civilians now the primary psychological battlefield in modern warfare? My take is in many conflicts, yes, the disruption of civilian life has become central to how pressure, fear, exhaustion and instability are projected into the war. Alright everyone, and that was a short one for tonight, and sorry we didn't have our guest, or it would have probably been longer. That's where we're going to leave it for right now. And I feel a bit hoarse, sound a bit hoarse for some reason. Haven't got a cold. Who knows? Maybe I was yelling in my sleep. As always, thank you for everybody for watching live, everybody in the chat, everybody supporting the channel, and everybody sharing the videos around while the algorithm quietly buries anything that isn't celebrity, gossip, political theatre, or 12 straight hours of breaking news about absolutely nothing. Tonight we covered the quantum arms race, the surveillance state, collapsing empires, AI systems, and increasingly cheerful future where governments, corporations, algorithms, and intelligence agencies all merge together into one giant managerial machine that definitely has your best interests in heart. On a more serious note, we looked at the tragedy in Starobilsk and the growing reality that modern warfare is increasingly consuming civilian life far from the traditional front lines. Because whether people agree politically or not, ordinary people always end up carrying the heaviest burden of the war. Before we go, tonight's show was sponsored by the Systems at Scale book series, available now on Amazon and in both paperback and Kindle editions. If you enjoy topics we discussed on this channel, technology, power, geopolitical systems, surveillance, and the future global order, you'll probably enjoy the books as well. Also, next Sunday's show may not happen. I'll likely not be in Belarus next weekend, and at the moment I honestly don't know if I'll have time, equipment, or the setup available to do full live stream properly from where I am. However, I still will be posting short videos and updates where I will be throughout that period on the channel's Telegram and Instagram. So if you follow those, you haven't. So make sure you follow those if you already haven't. And honestly, considering the speed of the world is collapsing into technological insanity at the moment, I'm fairly certain that there'll be still plenty to talk to by the time we return. So thank you again for watching. Stay safe, stay awake, stay question everything, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Through the snow and the light. From the other side, we're broadcasting the truth between the old guard and the tech-driven youth.